100 years ago, monstrous creatures called demons suddenly appeared, forcing what was left of humanity to take shelter behind a massive barrier. To fight back, they placed all their hope in magicians, the only ones who could stand against the demonic threat. These magicians are ranked by their strength. The most powerful among them, those in the single digits, are revered as humanity's greatest protectors. And he is one of them. A demon lets out a final screech as it's struck down in a flash of light. A young magician lands gracefully, unimpressed. He had already defeated 12 of them, casually noting that was the last of the pack. With a flick of his wrist, he unleashes a chain, a magic formula that instantly restrains the last of the creatures. This is Uhulus Regan. Among more than 10,000 magicians, he stands at the absolute peak, the undisputed number one. With the battle over, he uncorks his canteen and casually pours water over his head, remarking that all the demons were taken care of. Letting out a sigh, he admits to himself that even though it's constant fighting, he feels much more comfortable out here than he ever did in the army. He gazes at the serene landscape, finding it ironic that such peaceful scenery can only be found in the demon-infested outside world. Watching a bird soar through the sky, he can't help but wonder what it feels like to be free, quietly vowing that one day he'll find out. Several weeks later, at the army headquarters of Alpha, an older man in a military uniform looks at Uhulus and asks if there's any chance he might reconsider his decision. Aluza's answer is a firm no. He explains that he's fulfilled all the conditions for retirement, retaking the continent and serving the required time. All he wants now is to take it easy. But the Governor-General isn't ready to let him go, arguing that Uhulus is too valuable of a combat asset to humanity to simply be allowed to retire. Uhulus calmly reminds him of the regulations. Anyone who has served for 10 years and achieved notable feats is free to leave the service. He points out that since he started at 6 years old, this year marks the end of his decade of service. The two stare each other down, the tension thick in the air. Uhulus firmly states that he believes he has worked more than enough. The Governor-General's mind drifts. While the barrier protects 7 countries, casualties continue to mount. Alpha is the only nation whose yearly losses are decreasing. And the sole reason for that is because they have the single magician, Uhulus. The Governor-General worries that if they were to lose him now, they wouldn't just fail to retake territory, they might not even be able to defend their own country. Changing his approach, the Governor-General admits his desperation and offers a compromise. Instead of retirement, how about a long-term leave? He promises to grant any wish within his power, even providing accommodations for Aluza's research. With a sly look, he adds that he can provide Uhulus with a place that will be greatly useful to him going forward. Uhulus is immediately suspicious. He realizes this is just a deal to keep him on call, asking if this means he has to comply whenever he's summoned. The Governor-General's silence is all the answer he needs. Uhulus understands. Knowing he couldn't expect to retire easily, he accepts the compromise. He is told to wait at his personal quarters until the preparations are complete. As the door slams shut, the Governor-General lets out a heavy sigh. He knew this day would eventually come. He reflects on Aluza's past with regret. Since Uhulus was sent straight to the battlefield as a child, he never received a general education. The Governor-General feels they are reaping what they sowed, and wishes he could give the boy that missed opportunity now. He pulls out Aluza's file, hoping that if the boy can find something he wants to protect of his own accord, then he, as the Governor-General, will never have to give him another order again. And so, the useful place the Governor-General chose for him was the Alpha Second Magic Academy, a sprawling campus filled with students his own age. Uhulus is less than thrilled. For him, this isn't a new beginning, it's a cage. He grumbles internally, cursing the Governor-General for sending him to an academy. He scoffs at the idea of becoming friends with students who blindly believe magicians should stake their lives for the country. All he wants is to get to his room and be left alone. He decides to head for the research ward, ignoring the other students. But as he walks, a sudden gust of wind blows something past him. He looks up just in time to see a girl cry out as her ribbon is carried away by the breeze. He catches it effortlessly. A cheerful girl with blonde hair runs up, apologizing. She explains it flew away while she was trying to retie it. Seeing his uniform, she asks if he's a new student too. Uhalus hands her the ribbon, confirming that he is. Just then, another girl calls out Alice, and Uhalus sighs internally. A classmate. He already feels like this is going to be troublesome. Alice's friend, a girl with bright pigtails, waves them over, announcing that the entrance ceremony is about to begin. Uhalus sees this as the perfect chance to escape. As Alice tells her friend she's ready to go, he prepares to slip away. Alice waves goodbye, happily telling Uhalus she'll see him at the ceremony. But Uhalus has no intention of going. He turns and walks away, determined to find his room before any more social interactions can find him. As he walks through the corridors of the research ward, he's surprised by just how many students are there. He glances at a noisy group of students, wanting nothing to do with them. He quickly finds his assigned room and reaches for the doorknob. The moment he opens the door, he stops in his tracks. The room is massive, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, expensive furniture, and huge windows letting the light. He explores his new quarters, impressed. Not only is it a comfortable living space, but it's also a fully equipped, state-of-the-art laboratory. Reading a book, Uhalus starts to warm up to the idea. He realizes he can use the Academy's vast library for his research, concluding that there's no better place for him to be. The chimes of the clock tower signal the start of the entrance ceremony. He thinks about how most of these students will automatically end up in the army after graduation, the very system he just managed to escape from. He smiles to himself, admitting that he can't really complain. Just as the Governor General promised, he feels like he'll be able to have a satisfying time here. But just as he thinks that, his door creaks open. Suddenly, a shadowy form materializes inside his room. A woman's voice greets him. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Uhalus-kun." The woman introduces herself as Sisti Nexophia, the chairman of the school. Uhalus recognizes the name, immediately sensing her intimidating presence. Uhalus politely states that he was planning to greet her after he settled in. He recalls hearing she had resigned from service and notes that her youthful appearance must be why she's called a witch. Without warning, Sisti leans in, her face just inches from his. Uhalus is startled by her sudden closeness as she stares at him intensely. She pulls back with a playful sigh, remarking that as expected of a singles magician, her little test didn't faze him. Uhalus recalls hearing that she was also a single, but Sisti humbly replies that she was only number 9 and just for a short time. Sisti then cuts to the chase, asking him why he isn't attending the entrance ceremony. Uhalus answers bluntly. He states he has no intention of attending classes like the other students, as his only desire is to focus on his research. He closes his eyes and adds that he doesn't have time to waste making friends with anyone. Sisti smiles, but her words are a clear threat. She informs Uhalus that the Governor General gave a very specific order. If he neglects his schoolwork, he'll be forced to resume his military service immediately. Uhalus's face twists in anger. "That tyrannical geezer," he mutters, while Sisti simply maintains her pleasant smile. She tells him not to stress so much. All he needs to do is attend the bare minimum of classes and get a passing score on his homework to earn enough credits. She gives him a critical warning. Since a magician's rank is proof of their ability, he must keep his identity as number 1 a secret to avoid an uproar. Uhalus agrees, saying he has no interest in boasting and just wants a life free of trouble. With their business concluded, Sisti says her goodbyes, telling him to come to her office if he ever needs anything. As the door closes, she leaves him with one last piece of advice. Make your school days meaningful. Uhalus can only sigh in exhaustion. He looks out the window of the grand building, already feeling his hopes for a quiet, free life slipping away. The camera pans out, showing the sprawling campus of the Magic Academy. 3 weeks have passed since the start of the school year. Uhalus sits in a classroom for the first time, reflecting on the academy system. He'd realized last week that if he didn't start attending class soon, he'd quickly run out of his allowed absences. He enters a large, tiered lecture hall, a strange new environment for him. He notes how big the classrooms are as he walks past a group of gossiping students. The students immediately notice him, pointing him out as the one who's been absent since day one. They mock him for being carefree and lacking motivation. Ignoring their comments, Uhulus simply walks to an empty desk and sets his book down with a loud plop. All he wants is to avoid stirring up any trouble. He calmly opens his book, pretending not to notice the continued stares from his new classmates. A cheerful voice suddenly greets him. It's Alice, the girl he met on the first day. She walks up to his desk and happily reintroduces herself. She asks if he'd been feeling unwell, but is just happy to see he's back. Uhulus gives her a short, one-word answer, hoping to end the conversation. He then tells her bluntly that he wasn't sick. He was just playing hooky because the lectures sounded boring. He asks her not to mind him, as she's being a distraction. Poor Alice is completely flustered by his coldness and immediately apologizes. But her friend Tesfia isn't having it. She marches over and gets in Aluza's face, angrily asking what's with his attitude when Alice was only checking on him out of worry. Uhulus apologizes for causing a sudden fuss, but clarifies that he simply doesn't want them to worry about him in the future. Meanwhile, Tesfia tells Alice she has nothing to apologize for. Tesfia proudly introduces herself as being from the noble house Favel, demanding that Uhulus name himself as proper manners would require. Uhulus can only sigh, thinking he literally just told them to not mind him. After internally mocking how nobles force their manners on others, he gives his name as Uhulus Regan. He then flatly states that he has no interest in getting to know her and asks her to leave. Tesfia is shocked. She completely loses her temper, infuriated by his dismissive attitude. Tyrannical, no interest. Just as she's about to explode, the bell rings and the teacher enters, telling everyone to take their seats. Alice has to physically drag a hissing Tesfia away. The teacher begins the class, holding up a card. He explains that upon enrollment, every student was given a magician license, the same kind issued to magicians who work for the state. He continues, explaining that by infusing the license with mana, it will display their rank. It essentially calculates their combat ability based on their mana and other personal qualities and converts it into a number. However, this number can change based on their efforts and mission results. The class is impressed. It turns out that while most of the students have 5 or 6-digit ranks, both Alice and Tesfia are in the 4-digit range, which is considered exceptionally high for freshmen. The other students start whispering, recalling that the two of them were the talk of the school after acing the entrance exams. The teacher's attention then turns to Uhulus, asking what happened to his license. Uhulus looks up and calmly replies, "Pardon me, I lost it." The class erupts in shocked whispers. Uhulus, however, isn't concerned. He remembers the chairman's warning to keep his rank a secret and thinks that losing his license is actually the perfect cover. Tesfia scoffs at his excuse, mockingly asking if he's just too embarrassed to let anyone see his rank. The other students who were mocking Uhulus earlier join in, telling him to drop out if he's not motivated. Tesfia challenges him, saying if he's so annoyed, he should just show them his rank. The blonde student smirks, remembering that the next class involves mock battles. He decides that's where he'll teach the hooky-playing newcomer a lesson. Later, the students change into their training gear in the locker rooms. In the girls' room, Alice nervously sighs about the upcoming battle. Tesfia, however, is full of confidence, telling her to be prepared to be surprised by her secret weapon. Meanwhile, the mood in the boys' locker room is somber and quiet as everyone gets changed. Uhulus sits alone, completely unfazed. The class gathers in front of a large, domed building. The instructor announces that this is the training dome for their mock battles. He explains that inside, all physical damage is converted into mental damage, so they won't be injured even if they're knocked unconscious. They are encouraged to use whatever skills they have, be it martial arts, weapons, or magic. He then reveals the special equipment for the day, AWRs, or auxiliary weapons. These are armaments specifically designed for magicians that assist with magic configuration. Students who own a personal AWR are allowed to use them, while the school has prepared some for those who don't. As the others head for the supply cases, Alice calls for Tesfia to join her. Tesfia proudly shows off her personal AWR, a large, ornate sword passed down through her family. The other students watch in awe, impressed that she already has her own weapon. As Uhlus stands by, thinking how antiquated a sword is, the blonde student from class confronts him. With a smug grin, the student holds up his own rapier-like AWR and challenges Uhlus to a fight, since they're both freshmen. Uhlus accepts immediately. Perfect. He figures he can just play around with this guy for a bit and then get back to his reading. The student then asks what weapon he'll be using. Uhlus simply holds up the book he's been carrying the whole time. His opponent, is dumbfounded. The student bursts into laughter, finding it hilarious that Uhlus would dare to use a book against someone with an AWR. He declares that he'll use Uhlus as his personal punching bag. Uhlus, completely unfazed, tells him to come at him anytime. He just wants to get this over with so he can read. Alice watches from the sidelines, confused and worried about what he plans to do with a normal-looking book. Not wasting a second, the student lunges forward, yelling that he'll end the fight in an instant. He swings his rapier wildly, but Uhlus effortlessly dodges every single attack. Uhlus notes that the boy has no form, relying only on strength. Frustrated, his opponent decides to use magic, shouting "Fireborn Blade," as his weapon bursts into flames. Uhlus is unimpressed. The spell is just a simplified, menial version of a high-level one. He's actually getting second-hand embarrassment watching how satisfied the boy is with such a basic technique. The crowd, however, erupts in cheers, amazed that a novice can use a spell of this level. The student smirks, thinking Uhlus still has some fight left in him. Uhlus simply holds out his book and declares, "All right then, this fight." With a calm, focused gaze, he places his hand on the book's cover and finishes his sentence, "is over." The student, unaware of what's happening, swings his flaming sword, unleashing the full force of his spell. But at that exact moment, Uhlus trips, stumbling forward directly into the path of the attack. The spell connects, creating a huge explosion of light and smoke that engulfs Uhlus completely. The onlookers, especially Alice, watch in horror. When the smoke clears, Uhlus is lying motionless on the ground. His opponent stands over him, panting, as Alice cries out his name in shock. She rushes to his side, shaking him and asking if he's okay, begging him to answer. But his eyes remain vacant. And then, as if nothing happened, he sits straight up. Alice stares at him, completely bewildered. He casually brushes off his shoulder, reminding a stunned Alice that the training area prevents any real physical damage. His opponent, confused but victorious, asks if he's fine with that being the end of it. Uhlus, already absorbed in his book again, simply agrees, wondering if maybe he ended the fight a little too quickly. As the other students cheer for the winner, Uhlus reflects on his acting. He definitely pretended to lose, carefully making it look like he took the hit on purpose. But seeing their reaction, he starts to think he might have overdone it. He looks up at the training dome's ceiling, coming to a new realization. Adapting to school life has its own fair share of troubles. At the training hall, a group of students milled about. One of them approached Alice, reminding her that her turn for the mock battle was coming up soon. She cheerfully confirmed, while Uhlus Regan simply sat on the floor, engrossed in his book. Alice admitted to Uhlus that despite being a freshman, she didn't have much real combat experience, but she was determined to give it her all. He quietly wished her luck, his eyes never leaving his book. Hearing his simple encouragement, Alice paused, a slight blush rising to her cheeks, surprised by his words. With a bright smile, she thanked him and told him not to push himself either, even if he wasn't hurt. After losing her own match, she wished him the best and waved goodbye as she walked away. As she ran off, Uhlus gave a simple, "okay," finally looking up from his reading for a moment. Once she was gone, Uhlus let out a quiet sigh, leaning back. He muttered to himself that he'd just gone with the flow and said things without thinking, feeling more tired than he'd realized. He recalled the moment she had tended to his hand, wondering why she was so concerned for him. It was a strange feeling for the war-weary magician. Shaking off the thought, he decided it wouldn't hurt to watch the matches for a little while. He closed his book as Alice stepped into the arena, facing off against her opponent, a blonde-haired upperclassman. With a fierce cry, Alice charged forward, brandishing a long spear. Her opponent, seemingly caught off guard by her aggression, barely had time to react. He clenched his fist in frustration as he dodged her swift, sweeping attack, clicking his tongue in annoyance. The two fighters clashed, the sound of metal on metal ringing through the training hall as the opponent blocked her strike with a gauntlet. Alice quickly spun away, creating distance before striking again. Her opponent felt a sting on his ear, realizing the training hall's system was transmuting the damage. But before he could recover, she closed in again, landing a solid blow. Getting serious, the upperclassman decided to use magic. He gathered his power and unleashed a barrage of beginner-level ice arrows, challenging her to handle the attack. Alice's expression sharpened. In that case, she thought, her eyes glinting with focus as she prepared her counter. With a fluid motion, she created a swirling barrier of light. The ice arrows were deflected, zooming past her harmlessly, much to her opponent's shock. And with a final, decisive strike, she landed a clean hit, ending the match. A beep signaled her victory. The crowd murmured in surprise as Alice caught her breath. From the sidelines, Uhalus analyzed her technique, identifying her weapon as an old-fashioned naginata and her magic as a diffuse light-type reflection. One of the onlookers commented that a move like that was beyond any ordinary student, guessing that Alice must be a 4-digit ranker. Another explained that magic is typically divided into common acquirable attributes, but light and dark attributes are different. The second student elaborated that light magic requires a rare, natural-born affinity. A woman watched from the crowd, a tear of pride rolling down her cheek as she whispered, "That's my Alice." Just then, a girl with reddish-brown pigtails stepped forward, calling out to her friend, FIA. She told everyone to stop watching and get back to their own training, reminding them that the best way to increase mana is to exhaust it repeatedly. With the excitement over, the other students began to pair off for their own matches. Uhalus decided it was time to get back to his reading, but as he turned, a book was suddenly swiped from his hands. He froze, turning to see the girl with the pigtails standing there, looking at him with a stern expression. "Hold it," she commanded. Her eyes narrowed as she glared at him, demanding a bit of his time. Uhalus sighed at her persistence, complaining that she should consider his feelings for once. Alice quickly intervened, telling her friend FIA to stop, but FIA was adamant, declaring that he needed to learn a lesson. "You really think light of me, don't you?" FIA asked, her voice sharp with anger. Uhalus, however, remained completely unfazed, recalling a lesson about how nobles tyrannically force their manners on others, and coolly wondered what he should do now. Tesfia Favel, now furious, demanded he not forget the slight against her house. But Uhalus simply glanced back, dismissing her concern with a cold "what of it?" leaving her utterly speechless. She yelled at him not to give her that nonsense, claiming he couldn't possibly understand the weight of her family name. Unmoved, Uhalus simply thought to himself that this was his fault for getting involved, wondering how many more times she would interrupt his reading time. His patience clearly worn thin, he looked her straight in the eye and told her to stop involving herself with him. Enraged by his dismissive attitude, FIA screamed at him not to treat her like a fool and slapped his precious book straight out of his hands. It flew through the air and landed on the floor with a thud, shocking everyone present. With her sword drawn and pointed at his face, she challenged him to a duel. A crowd gathered, murmuring as they watched the tense standoff. Uhalus knelt down to pick up his fallen book, his expression unreadable. He stood up, calmly stating that she had mistreated his precious documents. He agreed to the duel, but with conditions. It would be just the two of them, with no one else involved. His eyes glinted with a cold fire as he added, I have no intention of losing kindly. The scene shifts. Later, the Academy's chairman, Sisti Nexophia, looked shocked, having heard the news. She couldn't believe he was actually going to duel the daughter of House Favel after school. Over the phone, she pleaded with Uhulus to call it off and avoid a worst-case scenario. From his seat in her office, Uhulus casually reassured her that he wouldn't take a child seriously and would be sure to hold back. But when she asked him to cancel the duel entirely, he gave a simple, firm answer. That's a no. He explained that mock battles were formally allowed, and any attempt by the chairman to intervene would only make it a bigger problem. Besides, he just wanted to protect what little free time he had left. Sisti argued that it would be fine since magic attacks in the training hall were converted to mental damage. But Uhulus was a singles magician, a fact that seemed to worry her. She warned him that if he really wanted to, he could leave his opponents severely crippled, and urged him to go easy. Uhulus simply replied, I know. As he was about to leave, Uhulus spotted a case on her desk. He asked if he could borrow it, and she agreed, though she seemed hesitant. Uhulus took the case and left the office. Sisti watched him go, then clicked open another, identical case left on her desk. Inside lay a formidable, black magical sword, its hilt bound in chains. Meanwhile, as FIA and Alice were leaving for the day, some classmates invited them to a study session. Alice politely declined, saying they already had plans. Once they were alone, Alice turned to FIA, asking her friend if she was really going through with the duel. FIA admitted that she knew she was going overboard and that the weight of the Favel name meant nothing to someone like Uhulus. But still, she started, her voice trailing off as Alice listened with concern. FIA turned back with a look of fierce determination, declaring that those who insult her efforts and her pride cannot be easily forgiven. Later, Uhulus arrived at the empty training hall, noting to himself that he was a bit early. He looked up at the observation deck, sensing that the chairman had come to watch the duel. But she wasn't the only one observing. He could feel another powerful presence nearby. Though he couldn't see them, he could sense their immense power, a 3-digit ranker, likely present at the chairman's request. Uhulus commented that being observed so closely made it hard to relax, just as a voice called out, announcing they kept him waiting. Tesfia Favel and Alice had arrived. FIA admitted she was worried he'd break his promise, but Uhulus simply told her to hurry up so they could get started. As he spoke, FIA's eyes widened in disbelief, noticing he wasn't carrying a proper weapon. Don't worry, Uhulus said with a smirk, casually unfolding a piece of paper from the training hall. FIA stared in utter shock, screaming, That's just paper! FIA couldn't believe he planned to fight her with a piece of paper, but Uhulus calmly confirmed that was his plan. He explained he'd borrowed it from the chairman and that it would be more than enough to handle her, which only made FIA angrier, muttering that he really liked to belittle people. Uhulus then laid out his condition. If he won, she would stop meddling with him. Alice, trying to be helpful, offered to help him study since she was a 4-digit ranker, but he flatly told her it was unnecessary. FIA agreed, but added her own condition. If she won, he would have to apologize for everything he'd done. Uhulus casually noted that he thought he already had, but agreed to her terms. FIA then placed her sword into a device on the floor. With the preparations complete, she turned to Alice, telling her that the starting signal was up to her. Alice hesitantly reached for the control panel for the damage displacement system. Alice looked on with a worried expression, a bead of sweat running down her face. With both combatants staring each other down, ready for battle, she took a deep breath and asked if they were ready. And with a single word, the duel began. The moment the signal was given, FIA exploded into action, dashing towards Uhulus with blinding speed. She unleashed a flurry of sword strikes, but Uhulus effortlessly dodged each one. He noted internally that her movements weren't bad compared to the other students. But, he thought, she put a little too much force behind her swings, leaving her unbalanced. She continued her assault, lunging and thrusting, but he evaded every attack with minimal movement. Growing breathless and frustrated, Fia skidded to a stop, complaining that all he was doing was running away. With tears of frustration in her eyes, she screamed at him, "Fight me, like you want to win." As she swung her sword again, Uhulus finally stopped dodging. He met her blade with his rolled-up paper, and to her shock, it blocked the steel with a loud cling. Fia's eyes went wide in disbelief. She stumbled back, unable to comprehend what just happened. That couldn't be ordinary paper. "No, it's just paper," Uhulus stated plainly, casually flapping the document. Fia refused to believe it was possible. She gritted her teeth, calling it impossible as she parried another one of his paper strikes. Uhulus simply asked if she still wished to continue. Refusing to accept defeat, Fia told herself she had just let her guard down. She didn't know what trick he'd pulled, but someone like him should be a walk in the park. But before she could finish her thought, Aluza's voice cut through the air, cold and sharp, as he pointed out her biggest weakness. "You're full of openings." Before Fia could even register his words, he closed the distance in an instant, the edge of the paper now just inches from her face. Fia was sent tumbling across the floor, her sword clattering beside her. She hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind out of her. Alice cried out her name in alarm. Catching her breath, Fia couldn't believe what had just happened. Alice rushed to her side, but Fia could only stare at her own trembling hands, muttering, "This can't be." Uhulus stood over them, his expression unchanged. "What'll it be?" he asked. "Do you admit defeat? Fioesh mindrist. Lose? Her? To him, the thought was incomprehensible. He was everything she hated, lazy, disrespectful of nobility. He was the type of person she despised. She had worked so hard her entire life to overcome the prejudice against people who didn't put in any effort. All her training, all her strength, she had never been belittled before. But now, she had to face a painful truth. She was the one who had been looking down on him. Alice tried to tell her it was enough, but Fia pushed herself back up, grabbing her sword. Fueled by pride, she refused to lose, declaring she would make him apologize. Her eyes blazed with renewed fire as she stared at the ancient runes on her blade. "I won't stand for it," she vowed. Refusing to let him deny all of her hard work, she unleashed her ultimate technique, crying out, "Icicle sword!" A massive blade of pure ice materialized above her. As the giant ice sword hurtled towards him, Alice screamed in panic, telling Uhulus to get out of the way. But Uhulus didn't even flinch. He simply raised his hand and tapped the tip of the rolled-up paper. With that one tiny tap, the entire icicle sword shattered into a million pieces, the sound echoing through the hall. Fia and Alice could only stare in stunned silence as the shards of ice rained down around them. Fia collapsed to the ground, defeated. "No way," she whispered. Uhulus casually walked over to her as she let out a small yelp of surprise. And, with a gentle plop, he tapped the paper on her head, a clear sign that the match was over. Leaning down, Uhulus looked at her and, to her surprise, offered a simple, sincere apology. He told her he hadn't been trying to insult her, and if that's how she took it, then it was his fault. Fia looked up, shocked by his words. Overwhelmed by his unexpected kindness and the crushing weight of her defeat, Fia began to cry, admitting that she had gotten too worked up and apologizing in return. Uhulus watched her, his gaze softening for a moment. Fia, still flustered, commented that he was a surprisingly honest person. She admitted that because he stepped up and apologized, she couldn't help but respond in kind. "I guess I lost," she mumbled, clearly down in the dumps. But just as Uhulus was about to leave, Fia grabbed his sleeve, stopping him. He turned to leave, but Fia quickly grabbed his sleeve. "What is it?" he asked, with tears still fresh on her cheeks. She looked up and asked, "How did you do it?" "That thing just now." Uhulus calmly reminded her of the unwritten rule against asking a magician about their hidden techniques. Fia admitted she knew the rule, but the sight had been so unbelievable that she couldn't stop herself from asking. Suddenly, the sound of slow, deliberate clapping echoed through the training hall, interrupting their conversation. It was the chairman, Sisti Nexophia. She praised FIA for the high-level mock battle, but a flustered FIA could only ask what brought her here. Sisti smiled, explaining that since Uhalus had requested she reserve the hall, she felt like coming to observe. Uhalus, however, looked less than pleased to see her. She clarified that she wasn't worried about him. She came because she was worried about what could have happened to FIA. But FIA was more concerned about how Uhalus had shattered her icicle sword, asking, "Who are you?" The chairman decided it would be easier to just show them. She announced that Aluz's license had come in from the army that morning and suggested he let the girls see it. She then presented a card to them. A number popped into view, projected from the license. A single, unmistakable digit, 1. FIA's world turned upside down. Her eyes widened in utter disbelief as she stammered, "He's rank numero uno." Uhalus shot an annoyed look at the chairman, reminding her that she was the one who said to keep his rank a secret. She just laughed, admitting their reaction was great and that she figured it was fine to tell these two, calling it a matter of fate. The chairman then playfully warned the girls not to tell anyone else, or there would be instant punishment. FIA and Alice could only stand there, dazed, muttering that he was the same age as them. FIA pointed out that Alice didn't seem very surprised. FIA's comment snapped Alice out of it. She started stammering, admitting she was so surprised she had frozen up. With the revelation out, the chairman stepped towards Uhalus, changing the subject. She asked him why he was doing so much research. He replied that it was to make things easier on himself. The chairman smiled slyly, suggesting that if these two girls got stronger, it would also make his life easier. But Uhalus dismissed the idea, saying the girls couldn't do it if they just spent their school lives as normal students. He cut to the chase, asking what she was telling him to do. With a triumphant smile, the chairman put her hand on his shoulder and gave her final command. "You will teach these two girls." Uhalus could only stare back, completely stunned. Inside a vast training hall, the chairman, Sisti Nexophia, gave Uhalus an unexpected order. He was to become the instructor for two first-year students, Alice and Tesphia. Uhalus immediately tried to refuse, claiming he didn't have the know-how and had never taught anyone before. But Sisti simply smiled, brushing off his concerns by stating that no one could rival his combat techniques. She leaned in close, whispering that he only needed to teach them during his breaks from research. Her persuasive, almost threatening, tone left him with little room to argue. Uhalus let out a heavy sigh. He knew that ignoring a direct request from the person with the real power at this school would only lead to more trouble down the line. The two girls watched on, sensing the tension. Defeated, Uhalus gave in and accepted the position. Sisti seemed pleased with his answer as he immediately asked for permission to leave. As he walked away, he muttered to himself that there was no way he could ever negotiate with a woman like her. Sisti watched him go, a sly smile on her face, having gotten exactly what she wanted. Uhalus departed without another word, leaving the three women behind him in the now empty hall. Tesphia stared after him in disbelief, muttering that if someone like him was rank number 1, the world must be ending. She scornfully labeled him a deserter who ran away from the front lines to live an easy life. Suddenly, Tesphia felt a chill run down her spine. She realized Sisti was walking towards her, and a wave of fear washed over her as she wondered if she had said something she shouldn't have. Her body trembled as the chairman got closer. Sisti's eyes narrowed, her sharp gaze instantly silencing the prideful noble girl. From a distance, her voice softened as she looked at Aluz's retreating figure, cryptically stating that he has a lot going on. Turning back to the girls, Sisti explained that personal information on singles magicians like Uhalus is not publicly disclosed, so she could understand why they wouldn't know about his circumstances. She then gave them a lesson on what it means to be a single. There are only 9 of them in the world, with a rank equivalent to a general. Their mission isn't just exterminating demons, but actively reclaiming territory, and only the Governor-General has the authority to command them. With a knowing smile, Sisti told them that if they truly aim to be top magicians, they should put their pride aside and beg him to teach them. Alice, however, was thrilled by the idea. She excitedly pointed out that this meant they would be the only ones taught by the strongest magician in the world, a truly incredible opportunity. Sisti assured them she wouldn't force the issue, but guaranteed there was much to be gained from his instruction. Tesphia clenched her fist, her pride still wounded, but ultimately agreed. The scene shifts to a lecture hall, where a teacher is explaining the history of demons. They first appeared 100 years ago and are rated on a threat scale from F to SS, though an SS-grade demon hasn't been seen in 50 years. The lecture continues, detailing that demon extermination squads are typically composed of 4 or more individuals to minimize casualties in unexpected situations. The instructor explains squad composition basics. Fighting an A-grade demon requires a squad of mostly double-digit magicians, while lower-grade demons can be handled by triple-digit magicians led by a double-digit commander. To elaborate on the peculiarities of demons, the teacher called upon Uhalus, who stood up to answer. Uhalus began his explanation with confidence. He stated that demons gain strength by consuming mana, which is why they target humans. It's also common for them to cannibalize each other for the same reason. He continued, adding that demons can evolve into unique, variant grades if they assimilate or cannibalize another, and their power can increase simply by absorbing ambient mana. Even the weakest among them will resort to cannibalism to grow stronger. His explanation took a serious turn as he warned that the protective wall is weakening over time, making high-grade demons an even greater threat. The other students, including Tesphia and Alice, were shocked by this revelation. After Uhlus finished, the teacher was left momentarily speechless. The other students began whispering amongst themselves, dismissing the grim warning as a mere rumor, while Uhlus noted that this was clearly not public information. The flustered teacher quickly wrapped up the lecture, reminding everyone about their homework. But just as Uhlus was about to take his seat, a voice called out to him. It was Tesphia who had called out to him. Putting her hand on his shoulder, she sternly told him to come with her for a moment. She led him and Alice up to the school's rooftop. Uhlus, already annoyed, bluntly asked what they wanted. Tesphia started to bring up what he had said in class. Alice, with a worried expression, asked him directly if it was true that Babel's wall was weakening. Uhlus coolly replied that even if it was, it had nothing to do with them. Alice insisted that it did involve them, as they were aiming to become magicians who fight demons. But Uhlus was dismissive, stating that at their current level, there was nothing they could possibly do about it. Tesfia's patience snapped. "You're wrong," she shouted, her voice filled with passion. She argued that because they don't have much time, they have to prepare themselves to be ready to fight at any moment. Spending the next 3 years leisurely at the academy would bring her nothing but shame. With a determined sparkle in her eyes, she made her demand clear. He needed to train them so they would be ready to fight demons on the front lines. Uhlus looked back at her with a deadpan expression and gave a one-word answer. "Don't wanna." His blunt refusal left Tesphia completely stunned and flustered. Alice, seeing her friend's distress, began to plead with Uhlus on their behalf. Uhlus finally relented a little, saying he'd think about it because the chairman ordered him to. But then he directed a sharp jab at Tesphia, questioning if her noble upbringing meant she didn't know how to properly ask for a favor and calling it a waste of time to train people at their level. Alice gently reminded him of the chairman's words, that he was supposed to take good care of them. Her earnest plea seemed to hit its mark, causing Uhlus' heart to skip a beat. Uhlus conceded that Sisti had said something like that. He then turned to Tesphia, asking what she had to say for herself. The proud, noble girl struggled, but managed to force out a quiet please. Swallowing her pride completely, Tesphia looked up at him with a blushing, pleading face and formally asked if he would be so kind as to teach her. With her prideful demeanor gone, A brief silence fell over the rooftop as Uhulus and Alice simply looked at her. Uhulus couldn't resist teasing her, remarking that she wasn't so haughty now. He finally agreed to watch over their studies, on the condition that his own research takes priority. He then added that they might not even prove useful, causing an infuriated Tesfia to hiss at him. Tesfia retorted that he wouldn't know until he gave them a shot, claiming there was a possibility they could become strong enough to match him. But Uhulus corrected her, explaining that he already knew they were both exceptional. His point, he explained, was that being exceptional in school doesn't guarantee usefulness on a real battlefield. He told them that some magicians freeze up when they face a demon for the first time, losing their ability to use magic entirely. Therefore, even if he assisted with their training and helped them raise their ranks, it wasn't a guarantee of actual results when it truly mattered. Tesfia stubbornly repeated that they'd never know until they tried. Uhulus agreed, which is why he believed they needed to plan properly so they wouldn't end up useless in a real battle. Changing the subject, Tesfia mentioned something that had been bothering her. With both Uhulus and Alice in the group, she found the names too confusingly similar and suggested they change his. With a playful grin, she declared that from now on, he would be Al. Before Uhulus could even protest, the girls had made up their minds. Alice loved the idea, and Tesfia declared the matter settled, deciding they could all drop the honorifics to get closer. With their training session set, Tesfia invited Alice to lunch. Alice happily agreed, bidding farewell to Al and promising to see him after school. Left alone on the rooftop, Uhulus quietly processed the new nickname that had been forced upon him. Al-A. He watched them go, a small smile touching his lips as he thought to himself that Tesfia really liked to set the pace. With their first meeting over, he headed off on his own. Later, in the cafeteria, Uhulus found himself being scolded by one of the staff. With a look of disdain, she asked if it was his first time there. He confirmed that it was, and the woman impatiently told him that standing at the counter wouldn't get him anything. He had to buy a meal ticket from the ticket machine first. She pointed him toward a machine with a massive line of students stretching out before it, much to his dismay. A few minutes later, Uhulus returned to the counter, his expression dark. He'd come to the cafeteria on a whim, but was quickly regretting it. He was completely lost. In the military, you just walked down the line with a tray and food was piled onto it. This school's system, with its confusing ticket machine, was totally alien to him, and the students behind him were getting annoyed. Just then, Tesfia appeared, asking what he was doing. It only took her a second to realize the unbelievable truth. He had never used a ticket vending machine before. Uhulus admitted that while he knew of their existence, he'd never actually used one. He was baffled, wondering if the machines were designed to reject first-time users. Tesfia, sighing at how he was raised, simply told him that now all he needed to do was pay. The word pay triggered something in Uhulus. The idea of them taking his money for food was outrageous to him. "Isn't that extortion?" he yelled in a fit of rage, shocking Tesfia. His outburst drew whispers from the other students. Tesfia quickly pulled him aside, scolding him that it's common sense to pay for food from high-class restaurants. She asked if he'd ever bought anything at the school before. When he said no, she explained he could pay with a cash card or his license, neither of which he seemed to have. Uhulus explained that not only has he never had to pay for lunch before, but after he'd shown his rank to the chairman, she never gave him his license back. Tesfia was floored. He then delivered the final blow with dramatic flair. "I don't have a single cent on me." Tesfia, completely exasperated and wanting to avoid any more attention, reluctantly pulled out her own card to pay for him. She urged him to buy something quickly so they could leave, reminding him they had to see the chairman later. As he got his meal, she leaned in and whispered a reminder that the chairman had told him to avoid garnering unnecessary attention to protect his secret identity. Her words hit home, and Uhulus realized she was right. After they got their food, Uhulus told her he would pay her back, but she refused. She said she was the one paying him back. Her strange statement and the fact she hadn't bought anything for herself left Uhulus confused. Tesfia simply gestured down a hallway and said she was heading that way, expecting him to follow. As they walked, Uhalus questioned her actions, wondering if a noble like her should be concerned about something like lunch money. He thought her pride would prevent her from asking, but she calmly told him that wasn't the case. With a gentle, somewhat sad smile, Tesfia confessed that she had inconvenienced her mother by enrolling in the academy. Because of that, her mother only pays her tuition and she takes care of all her other expenses herself. Uhalus was surprised by her honesty. He had expected her to lash out, but instead, he saw a softer, more vulnerable side to her. He realized she could smile like that, too. Tesfia stopped walking and turned to face him, her expression turning serious. She told him she had realized something during their mock battle earlier. She looked him directly in the eyes, her gaze sharp and unwavering, as she asked him a direct question. "You held back, right?" Uhalus didn't answer, his silence confirming her suspicion. She explained that while she didn't notice it at the time, thinking back on it, she realized the truth despite his 4-digit rank. That's why she considered today's lunch as her payback for the lesson he taught her. Finally understanding, Uhalus realized her payback was for the mock battle, not the money. He figured she must have reflected on her defeat. He humbly accepted, and Tesfia confidently replied, "Of course you will." Tesfia continued that as someone aiming for the top, she should have seen through his act, and it's only natural for a single digit to hold back against a lower rank. Uhalus just watched her, seeing a new, more determined side to the prideful girl. She noticed him staring and asked what was wrong. Uhalus simply repeated her question back to her as he continued to gaze at her. Then, with his usual bluntness, he said, "Getting a good look at you. You're actually pretty cute. That's all." The unexpected compliment caught Tesfia completely off guard, making her drop her license in shock. She scrambled to pick it up, frantically asking what he was blurting out all of a sudden. Unfazed, Uhalus clarified his thought process, stating that she's beautiful and that any guy would likely find her easy on the eyes. He nonchalantly dismissed it as just a passing thought and began to walk away, asking if she was okay as he left her on the floor. Tesfia was left completely speechless, blushing furiously as she clutched her license to her chest. Tesfia yells at Uhalus, telling him to stop blurting out weird things. But he just seems confused, thinking he was complimenting her. It's clear she's still not used to his blunt way of talking. Back in his room, Uhalus starts rummaging through his things. It's a mess with books and items scattered everywhere, but he seems to know exactly what he's looking for. After a moment, he pulls out a strange-looking wooden object, satisfied that he brought it with him. Tesfia stands by, sword in hand, waiting for what comes next. Holding the mysterious item, Uhalus turns to the two girls and announces that their training is about to begin. Tesfia and Alice look on, completely clueless about what he has in store for them. Tesfia immediately shouts in protest, clearly not a fan of being ordered around without an explanation. Tesfia questions the massive size of the room, asking if he plans to destroy it. Uhalus calmly explains that it's his research room and bedroom, a privilege he earned through his accomplishments. He then tells them to listen closely. He clarifies that his training is solely focused on teaching them how to defeat demons. He warns them not to get their hopes up, as this might only raise their ranks a little. Seeing their confused faces, Uhalus decides to start with a question, asking them what factors they think are used to calculate a student's rank. Tesfia lists the standard answers: mana amount, spell difficulty, and mission completion rate. Alice agrees, adding mana comprehension. Uhalus confirms they're right, but says that's not the whole story, asking which factor matters most. It's Alice who gives the correct answer. She suggests that the most important factor is the number and grade of demons a student has killed. Uhalus confirms she's right. He explains that while slaying high-grade demons is the fastest way to increase rank, it's not something students get many chances to do. Therefore, his training will focus on a different method to raise their ranks in the future. Uhalus gives them an out, saying they can leave if they want to find another way to raise their rank. But Tesfia, determined as ever, declares that if his method works, she's all in. With that, Uhalus tosses the wooden object onto the table and says, "Then let's actually begin." In a flash, Uhalus swipes his hand, and the thick wooden stick is sliced cleanly in two. Alice and Tesphia can only stare in disbelief at the impossible feat. He tells them their first lesson is to learn mana bestowal. The girls are baffled, since they didn't see him use any mana. Realizing he needs to explain, Uhalus picks up a piece of paper. Uhalus tells them to watch closely. He holds a piece of paper and simply taps it with his finger as Alice and Tesphia lean in, trying to see what he's about to do. With a sharp sound, his finger slices right through the paper, as if it were a blade. The girls are completely stunned, wondering how he managed to cut it without a weapon. He begins his explanation. Normally, mana bestowal is used to strengthen an object. However, it's not very effective on organic materials because they absorb most of the mana, causing it to disperse. To demonstrate, Uhalus borrows Tesphia's sword. He says what he did wasn't simple mana bestowal. As he draws the blade, he points out that she's already unconsciously leaking her own mana into the weapon. To prove it, he shows them how the mana flowing from the sword is physically pushing her skirt away. He asks if this is what it looks like when she consciously manipulates her mana, leaving the two girls speechless. Alice is amazed at his precise control, but Uhalus explains that his technique is different. He's not just coding an object, he's mimicking the shape of a blade with his mana, completely enveloping it. Tesphia admits she can't do anything like that. He clarifies the amazing part of his technique. He isn't just outlining the paper, he's forming a blade purely out of his mana and using that to cut. Alice asks if that's even possible. Uhalus confidently tells them that if they can master this skill, they'll be able to reach the double-digit ranks. He then picks up the strange stick again. He presents the stick to them, stating that they will use it to practice their mana bestowal. His expression turns serious as he warns them that this is just beginner training and failure to master it means they wouldn't survive against a single demon. Alice inspects the mysterious item, and Uhalus casually reveals what it's made of, the corpse of a demon he killed. Horrified by the revelation, both girls immediately drop the sticks in disgust. Uhalus tells them to relax, explaining he's used it for years without any problems. He says it's a precious and unique training tool, but if they want to quit, it's no problem for him. He ends by telling them to pick them up and try channeling their mana into the sticks. Alice, ever the diligent student, agrees immediately. With a smirk, Uhalus gives an order, and the training begins with a sharp, painful pinch that makes the girls flinch. Tesphia is shocked. She realizes that the moment she tried to channel her mana into the stick, it was immediately forced out and dispersed. That was the unique property of the demon it was made from. With tears in her eyes, Alice asks the obvious question. If the stick disperses mana, how are they supposed to bestow their own mana to it? Uhalus simply looks at her and asks, "You don't get it?" Tapping the table for emphasis, Uhalus gives them a brutally simple answer. They just have to force it. The girls are confused about how to even begin forcing their mana. Uhalus sighs, stands up, and gives them a strange command. "Show me your skin." Though confused, Alice complies. Suddenly, Uhalus clamps down hard, pinching both of their arms. They cry out in pain, demanding to know what he's doing. He calmly explains that mana naturally flows through the body and tells them to focus on sending their mana down to their feet. He explains his method. Normally, when holding a weapon, a person's consciousness focuses on it, causing mana to flow there unconsciously. By pinching them, he's forcing them to move their mana away from the pain, teaching them deliberate control. And it works. The mana that was leaking out from their arms is now being redirected down to their legs, just as he instructed. His painful method is effectively fixing their bad habits. Uhalus looks down at their pained expressions and bluntly tells them they look like complete failures, questioning how they even have 4-digit ranks. He dismisses their efforts, saying this makes him think humanity is a lost cause, and decides to continue his research. But Tesphia, biting back the pain, glares at him with renewed determination, vowing to master this in no time. As Uhalus walks away, Tesfia asks for a hint. He doesn't even turn around, simply telling them to pinch each other and come find him once they've figured it out. With a serious look, Tesfia turns to Alice. She has only one thing to say about their new training plan: don't hold back. Later, as Uhalus walks them home, the two are still practicing, pinching each other's arms. Tesfia tells Alice to pinch even harder. Annoyed, Uhalus asks if they can really afford to not watch where they're going. And just as he says that, a loud bonk echoes through the street. Clearly, one of them wasn't paying attention. Tesfia has walked straight into a lamppost. As Alice checks if she's okay, Uhalus stops, looking irritated, and tells her to listen up. He gives her a harsh dose of reality. When facing a demon, there's no room for distraction. If she's too focused on mana bestowal to notice her surroundings, she's got her priorities completely backward. Finally, they arrive at the girls' dorm. Tesfia thanks him for walking them home. As she uses her card to enter, Uhalus takes a moment to observe the building. He's taken aback by what he sees. The place is a fortress with massive gates, security cameras, and a card identification system. It looks less like a school dorm and more like a high-security facility. Uhalus can't help but comment that the security is on the level of a prison, remarking how different it is from the boys' dorm. Alice just seems confused by his comparison. Tesfia thanks Uhalus again for the day, but as she turns, she's not looking where she's going and walks right into someone. She bumps right into the chest of an older student, letting out a surprised yelp. A beautiful upperclassman with long, dark hair smiles down at them. Alice and Tesfia immediately recognize her, exclaiming in surprise, "Dorm head?" The dorm head welcomes them back and asks about Uhalus. He introduces himself, explaining that the girls were late because they stayed behind to study with him. Her gaze lingers on him. She politely introduces herself as Hernera Sokolet, a sophomore. Uhalus recognizes her last name, his interest piqued by the fact a second-year student is a dorm head. Tesfia proudly explains that Hernera is the school's only 3-digit magician and that their families have known each other for a while. Hearing her high rank, Uhalus understands her position of authority. Hernera humbly says she's merely rank 375. As Uhalus processes this, she addresses him directly as Uhalus. Uhalus casually changes the subject, asking how Lord Veziest is doing. He reveals a personal connection, saying the man took great care of him in the past. Tesfia is shocked that Hernera knows Uhalus. The dorm head smiles warmly and confirms that her father does mention Uhalus from time to time. Hernera explains that while she's heard about Uhalus, it's their first time meeting. Deciding he can be informal with his acquaintance's daughter, Uhalus bluntly states the chairman forced him into tutoring. His honesty makes Hernera giggle. Switching back to a formal tone, Uhalus tells the dorm head that he'll likely be keeping the girls late for their training and asks for her understanding. A little flustered, Hernera asks if he would please call her Nera instead. Uhalus agrees without hesitation, suggesting that in that case, she can call him Al, since the other two already do. Hernera seems overjoyed by the suggestion. However, Hernera quickly catches herself. She politely explains that since it's their first meeting, it would be better to stick with Uhalus for now to avoid any issues. Uhalus simply agrees. As Uhalus prepares to leave, Hernera tells Alice and Tesfia they can just call her Senpai. She then quickly tries to get Uhalus's attention one last time before he's gone. She gives him a gentle warning, reminding him not to keep the two young ladies out too late, even if it's for tutoring. Uhalus acknowledges her concern. She hesitates for a moment, gathering her thoughts before making one more request. With a hopeful expression, Hernera asks if he would be willing to look over her studies as well, not all the time, but just every so often. Uhalus considers her request. From his perspective, teaching 3 people isn't much different from teaching 2. It doesn't really change anything for him. He agrees, but with a condition: she had better be serious when she says every so often. Hernera's face lights up with a cheerful yes. But Uhalus quickly manages her expectations, telling her not to get her hopes up. He explains that since she's already approaching the double-digit ranks, he's not conceited enough to think his guidance will do much for her. Hernura understands and promises to keep her expectations in check, saying she looks forward to his lessons. As Uhalus finally departs, she privately sighs, knowing her father's position means she has to remain formal for now. Walking away, Uhalus mutters to himself, "Good grief! What regrettable circumstances," clearly feeling overwhelmed by his new responsibilities. As night falls, Hernura dismisses the other girls, telling them it's time to turn into their rooms. Later that night, back in his cluttered research room, Uhalus glances at his pocket watch. It's getting late. He decides to check on Tesfia and Alice. He finds them still on the couch, looking exhausted but focused. Watching them, Uhalus is inwardly impressed. He hadn't expected them to progress so quickly, a skill that normally takes ages to learn, yet they're already starting to grasp the flow of mana. He approaches them with a new instruction, telling them to stop their current exercise and instead try to bring their mana all the way to their fingertips. He hovers his hand over theirs, explaining that by feeling his mana, they should be able to sense their own more easily. Alice feels a jolt from his mana, letting out a small sound. As he gets closer, he notices the swelling and bruising on their arms. He realizes they must have been practicing non-stop ever since they got back to the dorm. A quiet sense of respect forms, and he tells them to keep up the good work. He admits to himself that the two of them have genuinely surprised him. He reminds them not to lose focus, but Tesfia, deep in concentration, just tells him not to talk to her. Just then, Tesfia loses her concentration and her mana flares out. She complains that she was doing so well. Seeing this, Uhalus notes that they still need more practice and decides to call it a day. Tesfia looks up from the couch and asks him why he's stopping. She wonders if he has something else he needs to do. Uhalus simply replies that he has some minor business to attend to. The scene shifts, and we see him walking down a long, ornate hallway before knocking on a large door. A voice from inside grants him entry. He enters a vast office where the chairman, Sisti Nexophia, is waiting for him. She looks up and says, "Right on time." With a knowing smile, she addresses him informally, Uhaluskan, bringing the intense training session to a mysterious close. In the chairman's office, Uhalus Regan is summoned by Sisti Nexophia. She cuts right to the chase, reminding him about the practical abilities test coming up at the beginning of next month. Uhalus immediately guesses this meeting is about his rank. Sisti explains that to avoid any unnecessary fuss, she will be the one to personally review his test. But Uhalus can tell there's more to it. He looks her dead in the eye, demanding to know the real reason she called him here. Seeing that he won't be fooled, Sisti slides a document across her cluttered desk, getting straight to the point. Uhalus picks up the paper and reads it. It's a proposal for a new, dangerous curriculum, sending students outside the walls to fight real demons. He looks up, asking what exactly she expects him to do about it. Sisti clarifies that for now, she just wants his expert opinion on the matter. A heavy look crosses Uhalus's face. He immediately understands the underlying politics, stating that this proposal from the military only exists because he retired from the front lines. Sisti confirms his suspicion. She admits the proposal came in slower than she expected, but it was inevitable since all the other academies have already implemented a similar curriculum. Uhalus gives his unfiltered opinion. The students at this academy haven't received the necessary training for such a thing. He declares plainly that this plan will only lead to more deaths. She agrees with him, but explains the reality of the situation. With the defensive wall weakening and their strongest fighter, Uhalus, having left the front lines, the higher-ups are starting to panic. She admits to having only served on defense duty, so she turns the problem over to him. Given his experience, he knows more about demons than anyone, so she asks for his input on what to do. Sisti jokingly suggests a few simple solutions, like having Uhalus take care of the demons himself. He flatly rejects them, pointing out that would defeat the entire purpose of the curriculum. Uhalus gets down to the details of the proposal, pointing out its biggest flaw. The upperclassmen supervisors are still beginners themselves, making them practically useless for protecting the first years. He asks how much they can alter the plan, And Sisti replies they can change anything as long as the training aspect remains. With that confirmation, Uhlus points to a specific area on the map. He suggests a new location. It's farther away and primarily inhabited by the lowest grade demons, but he warns that B-grade demons could still potentially appear there. Even with these changes, he makes it clear that he can't guarantee the students will be perfectly safe. There's always a risk. Uhlus explains that while high-ranked demons are easily detected by the wall surveillance, some B-grade ones can slip through. Because of this, he believes the focus should be on providing the students with better supervisors. He then makes a bold suggestion. Have actual magicians supervise the students, or, at the very least, assign the highest-ranked students and teachers to the task. Sisti acknowledges the idea, though it seems to give her a headache. As Sisti starts sketching out the group formations, Uhlus reminds her that each group will have 5 students plus 1 supervisor. Sisti thinks to herself. She knows that not even the chairman can stand up to the military, which is why she's proceeding so cautiously. Deciding to put her trust in Uhlus' plan, she tells him to give it his all, catching him off guard. Just as Uhlus turns to leave, Sisti suddenly realizes her mistake as a host. She completely forgot to serve him any tea during their long discussion. Before he can walk out the door, she yanks him back by the arm, insisting that he wait. The scene shifts to a grand castle under the moonlight. An unseen person complains about being kept there and says they won't help anymore, while their captor cheerfully invites them to sit down for a chat. Time passes, and the day of the practical abilities test finally arrives. Inside a sunlit room, a voice is heard calling out for Uhlus. Outside his door, Tesfia and Alice have come to pick him up. Alice worries that he hasn't been sleeping well, but Tesfia is confident, saying that after their talk yesterday, he's sure to be in perfect condition. Uhlus opens the door, revealing a tired and menacing expression that immediately startles his visitors. He promptly slams the door in their faces. From inside, they can hear him muttering about how his warnings went ignored, while they just wonder if he got any sleep at all. Tesfia forces the door back open, teasingly offering to let him sleep next to her if he's having that much trouble. Still half asleep, Uhlus bluntly tells her that how he spends his time is his own business, and it's not like he can't fall asleep anyway. He then turns her joke back on her, saying that her offer sounds like it might lead to a pleasant nap, and asks if they can try it out. The unexpected reply leaves Tesfia flustered and Alice completely shocked. Uhlus casually says he was also just kidding, leaving Alice surprised that he can even make jokes. But Tesfia isn't amused, reminding him that they have a serious test today. He pauses for a moment, then asks if they have a test now. His question earns him a sharp rebuke from Tesfia, who tells him to hurry up and get ready. As they walk to the testing area, Uhlus yawns, complaining about how the chairman called him over so late at night. Tesfia asks if he has a plan for the test, but Alice says she's at least reviewed the material. Uhlus looks back at her with a knowing smirk, informing her that reviewing won't help. This test, he says, will be based entirely on practical ability. The news sends both Alice and Tesfia into a state of complete shock. All her days and nights of cramming flash before Tesfia's eyes. Realizing it was all for nothing, she gets fired up, declaring that practical skills are all that matter anyway, as she throws a few practice punches. She continues her warm-up, following up with a powerful high kick to get herself ready for the test. But her enthusiastic kick causes her to lose her balance and slip, landing hard on the ground while Uhlus walks past without a second glance. As the others walk past, Tesfia panics, realizing her skirt has ridden up from the fall. Flustered, she demands to know if they saw anything, yelling that it doesn't matter either way. Completely done with the morning's chaos, Uhlus sighs and announces he's going on ahead, leaving the 2 girls behind. At the testing site, an instructor addresses the assembled students. He explains that the morning test will be on their mana output, which will give a much better evaluation of their true talents than their initial entrance ranks. The students begin to murmur nervously amongst themselves. The instructor tells them to be quiet, assuring them that the results of this single test won't significantly change their overall rank. He continues, explaining that because it's important for magicians to conceal the type of magic they use, the test will be done privately behind a black veil. He encourages everyone to go all out. However, just as the test is about to begin, the instructor singles out Uhulus, telling him to make his way to a separate area, Zone 9, leaving Sisti to wonder why. In Zone 9, Sisti asks if he forgot to bring his AWR, a necessary tool for the test. Uhulus replies that it's not necessary and asks if he really has to do this. Sisti confirms that he does. After flicking a few switches, she tells him to stand in the designated spot and simply let out some of his mana. Uhulus complies, closing his eyes and releasing his power. On the monitor, the measurement climbs rapidly, hitting 80%, then 90% as the machine begins to beep. Suddenly, the machine lets out a loud bleep, and the screen glitches. Sisti stares in disbelief, having never seen such a high reading before. She can only wonder if the equipment itself has malfunctioned. Uhulus calmly assures her the machine isn't broken. Unfazed by the result, he asks to move on to the next test, leaving a stunned Sisti to wonder how being on the front lines could possibly grant someone that much mana. Still reeling, Sisti wonders if Uhulus was simply born with this much mana. She dismisses the thought as impossible and moves on, telling him the next test is to use a magic spell he's learned. However, Uhulus reveals that the army stopped assessing his abilities with this kind of test long ago. He explains that the gauge can't measure his output when he actually uses magic. Intrigued, Sisti leans forward with sparkling eyes, telling him to just go for it anyway. Uhulus warns her that the machine is definitely going to break. He says he's sure she has more of them, but agrees to only destroy one. Sisti smiles, finding his confidence acceptable. She gestures towards a large, circular target at the end of the hall and tells him to hit it with a spell. Uhulus agrees and walks into position. Deciding to hold back somewhat, Uhulus raises his hand and unleashes a swirling vortex of energy towards the target. While back in the main hall, the other students are still waiting for their turns. The instructor calls out the next student, telling Alice to make her way to Zone 2. She stands up, ready for her turn. Tesphia wishes her luck. As Alice begins to walk, she feels the ground rumble and suddenly becomes dizzy, wondering what's happening. A massive roar echoes through the entire facility, shaking the building and startling all the students who are waiting. The students are thrown into a panic, wondering if it was an earthquake or if something blew up. Smoke begins to fill the hallway as the instructor rushes towards the chairman, demanding to know what happened. Sisti calmly emerges from the smoke-filled corridor, telling everyone to calm down. As she coughs away the dust, she assures them it's nothing to worry about and tells them to continue with their tests. With a sly grin, she subtly uses her magic to clear the smoke from the air. Tesphia recognizes the disturbance and realizes that Zone 9 is where Uhulus is taking his test. Alice and Tesphia immediately rush towards the zone, Alice shouting his name in concern. They arrive to find Uhulus standing calmly amidst the lingering smoke and debris, completely unharmed. He reassures them not to worry, casually stating that he just did something that was a bit of a waste. The two girls quickly run off, but Sisti stops them, reminding them that they're still in the middle of testing. Watching him walk away, Sisti remarks on what an anomaly he is. She correctly guesses that the magic he just used was space manipulation, and is astonished he could do so much. Looking at the busted machine, she notes that it's just as expected from a former singles magician. Uhulus confirms her guess. However, Uhulus corrects her. The explosion wasn't part of the spell. It was simply the result of him incorporating too much mana, causing the machinery itself to blow up. This leaves Sisti wondering if he has an affinity for high-level fusion magic. As the concept of magic affinities is explained, Uhulus remarks that it would be troublesome if people knew about his own. He tells Sisti that if she buys his story, it would be convenient for him, though he admits he doesn't feel like he has an affinity for any particular attribute. Sisti doubts his claim. She points out that a magician of his level using a spell they have a special affinity for would create a much greater output than what they just saw. Uhulus asks what they're going to do about his test results. Sisti, deciding not to pry any further, explains that since his test didn't produce any errors but they still can't evaluate the results, he'll be given the highest possible score. She officially concludes his morning test and bids him good work. Uhulus doesn't seem particularly pleased with the outcome, but turns to leave without any questions. Once he's gone, Sisti collapses onto her desk with a sigh. She admits to herself that she got a little too carried away, letting her inner magician get the better of her. Just then, a young woman with silver hair named Loki Levaheller enters the room. Sisti quickly composes herself, apologizing for letting the visitor see her in an embarrassing state. Sisti tells her that it will be her turn for the next test and asks if she thinks she'll be fine. Loki confidently replies, yes. A young girl with blonde hair stands with a determined look on her face, thinking to herself that this was the very reason she'd come this far. The scene shifts to a classroom during lunchtime. While other students eat and chat, Uhulus Regan is slumped over his desk, lamenting that he forgot to bring his lunch. Suddenly, a bag of food drops onto his desk with a plop. Uhulus looks up, surprised, as a voice asks if he didn't bring anything to eat. It was his classmates, Alice Tyleek and Tesfia Favel, offering him some of their food with warm smiles. Uhulus asks if they're really sharing, and Tesfia casually mentions she just bought it at the kiosk. When Uhulus comments that it's nothing impressive, she immediately gets annoyed and tells him not to eat it. As Uhulus starts eating, Tesfia and Alice ask him what happened earlier during the test. He dismisses it, saying the measuring devices just malfunctioned, but they seem skeptical. Seeing their expressions, Aluza's tone sharpens, questioning if they're really going to pry into it. Tesfia is taken aback by his sudden intensity. Tesfia quickly backs down, admitting she shouldn't be digging into it. Uhulus thinks to himself that while he can't blame them for being curious, he has no obligation to tell them anything beyond the basics. He then adds that they might find their answers if they can face him one day. Changing the subject, Uhulus decides to thank them by sharing some information about the afternoon's test. He reveals that the test is going to be a mock battle. The news seems to worry both Alice and Tesfia. The girls are shocked, asking how he got that information. Uhulus explains that since mock battles are used to test students against higher-ranked opponents, they'll likely be fighting upperclassmen. He keeps the source of his information to himself, the chairman, and simply states that it's just a good way to measure a magician's rank. He gets up from his seat as he continues to explain. Uhulus elaborates that pitting them against an opponent they can't beat is the most effective way to measure their true ability, and that losing won't necessarily lower their rank. Hearing this, Tesfia stands up abruptly, her face flushed with determination. She declares that no matter who she's against, she'll fight with the intention to win. Uhulus simply wishes her good luck with a faint smirk. Annoyed that he laughed at her, Tesfia watches as he walks away. Alice asks if he's already leaving, and he confirms. As Uhulus leaves the room, he tells Alice he's supposed to take the test before the other students. The two girls are left wondering who his opponent could possibly be. Alice wonders if Aluza's opponent could be the chairman. Meanwhile, Uhulus enters the testing area. A woman's voice welcomes him as the door slides open. Uhulus immediately recognizes one of the two figures standing before him. It's the woman who was observing him in the training hall before. The young girl beside the woman steps forward and introduces herself formally. Her name is Loki Levaheller, and she's been dispatched by the Governor General to be his partner. Uhulus looks down at the small girl, immediately suspicious of the army's intentions. He flatly refuses, stating he doesn't need a partner. He argues that partnering with a ranked searcher like her would be a waste of resources, as high-ranking magicians usually team up to find demon cores. His eyes narrow as he accuses them of sending an observer, not a partner. The woman, Sisti Nexophia, admits Loki is inexperienced but insists she'll be an exceptional one. Sisti tells him not to jump to conclusions, revealing that for his mock battle, he'll be facing Loki. Uhulus understands that talk is useless here. Meanwhile, Loki dashes to her position, thinking back to a time when she was just like him. As the two face off, Uhulus sighs, ready to get this over with. Loki simply gazes at him, finally getting a good look at the man she's been pursuing. But instead of preparing to fight, Loki looks up at him with tears welling in her eyes and a faint, grateful smile, thanking him sincerely. Her strange behavior makes Uhulus pause. He feels a sense of familiarity, thinking he's met her somewhere before. Loki then states the condition for their duel. With a desperate plea in her eyes, she asks that if she can land a single hit, he would allow her to be his partner. Uhulus is intrigued. He can't understand why she would challenge him to an official duel, knowing full well what his rank is. A confident smirk spreads across his face. He finds her proposal interesting and accepts the challenge, adding, "If you can, that is." With the terms set, Sisti gives the signal for them to begin. Loki bows respectfully, her eyes filled with unwavering resolve. The moment the bell rings, Loki explodes into action, launching herself directly at Uhulus with incredible speed. Uhulus watches her approach, unimpressed. He thinks she's overestimating herself by coming straight at him, and casually draws his own set of throwing knives. Loki dashes forward, believing she can land a hit the moment the magic on her knife activates. At the same time, Uhulus unleashes his own volley of blades. She closes the distance in an instant, swinging her blade with the full intention of getting her one hit in. But as her knife is about to make contact, it stops dead. Loki looks on in shock, realizing her magic failed to activate. Uhulus calmly apologizes, explaining that he simply overrode her magic. Before she can react, he throws another set of knives, forcing her to jump back. As the fight continues, Uhulus effortlessly deflects her attacks. He notes that she's had good training and her mana handling is decent, but it's not nearly enough to challenge him. Loki can't believe it. No matter what she throws at him, he easily overpowers her magic. Even so, she continues to fight, gritting her teeth as she parries another one of his powerful blows. In a flash, Uhulus appears behind her, his hand held like a blade to her neck. "It's over," he says, his voice cold. Loki freezes, her eyes wide with shock. But Loki's reaction time is incredible. She dodges at the last second. Uhulus is impressed, grabbing her armed hand and commending her skill for a searcher of her rank. He easily disarms her, questioning why someone with her skills isn't out on the front lines. He walks away, reminding her that his reputation for not taking partners is well known throughout the army. Loki confirms that she knows. Everyone knows he's turned down countless requests, earning him the title of the solitary magician. But for her, it's different. Seeing her unwavering determination, Uhulus understands. A dark, intense look crosses his face as he decides to change his approach. He thinks to himself that if she won't give up, he'll just have to show her the overwhelming, crushing gap in their abilities. An immense, terrifying aura in the shape of a skeletal beast erupts from behind him. Loki is terrified. She realizes that getting a single hit is impossible. This raw power, this overwhelming pressure, this is the #1 magician. She tries to move, but her body won't respond. Tears of fear and frustration stream down her face. She's completely paralyzed, unable to move a single muscle under the weight of his power. Watching from the sidelines, Sisti is alerted by a beeping sound. She glances at her monitor, and her eyes widen in shock. A system error is flashing across the screen. The damage displacement system can't handle Aluza's mana, she yells. Realizing the danger, she immediately orders them to put the test on hold. Paralyzed and on her knees, Loki forces herself to move. She knows that if she runs away now, nothing will change, and she'll never be able to reach him. With renewed resolve, she pulls out another knife. With a desperate cry, she pushes through his oppressive aura, her eyes glaring with fierce determination. She knows this is her last chance, and if she fails, she'll never be able to stand by his side. As she begins to chant, a massive amount of energy gathers around her. Watching in disbelief, Sisti realizes what's happening. She can't believe it. It's octagon rank lightning magic, a feat unheard of for a girl her age. Loki unleashes her ultimate attack, roaring lightning. A massive wave of electrical energy explodes from her body, hurtling directly towards Uhlus. Uhlus raises his hands to defend as the powerful blast crashes against his barrier, creating a series of deafening explosions that rip through the testing ground. The entire area is engulfed in a roaring storm of lightning and smoke. As the smoke begins to clear, the crackling energy slowly dies down. Sisti looks on, her expression tense with worry. Loki stands alone in the now silent room, calling out to Uhlus. Exhausted and sweat-drenched, she looks up with a faint, hopeful expression, asking if she did a good job. Her body finally gives out, and she collapses. But before she hits the ground, Uhlus appears in a flash to catch her. Leaning against him, Loki smiles peacefully and says, "I'm glad." Uhlus watches her, admitting to himself that her display of power was beyond his expectations. As her hand goes limp, a small, dark crystal falls and rolls across the floor. In her fading consciousness, she laments that he still hasn't remembered her. Aluza's eyes widen in horror as he recognizes the object. Sisti dashes towards them, asking what happened. Uhlus ignores her, shouting at her to call for medical attention immediately as he kneels beside the unconscious Loki. Holding her, Uhlus can feel her life slipping away. He knows with grim certainty that if nothing is done, she's going to die. He looks at the crystal on the floor. It's a divine core, a demon's nucleus. He explains that it's a vile tool that temporarily boosts mana in exchange for the user's life force. He crushes it in his hand, wondering why she would sacrifice her own life just to achieve her goal. Checking her pulse, he realizes her condition is worsening. She has only a few minutes left at best. He understands that she knew the risks, and to respect her resolve, he decides to end her suffering quickly. But just as he raises his hand to deliver a final, merciful blow, Loki's hand weakly grabs his, stopping him. Sisti rushes to his side, asking about healing magic. Uhlus tells her it won't work, as her injuries aren't physical. Desperate, Sisti asks if there's any way to supplement her mana. Uhlus explains that supplementing mana is considered impossible. It's strictly regulated personal information that can't be shared. However, there might be a logical way to do it. Sisti agrees that the idea isn't bad, and since there's no other way, they have to try. Hearing this, Uhlus slowly raises his hand. His expression is deadly serious. He declares that they're talking about him, and for him, there isn't any common sense that he can't turn on its head. He looks at Sisti and confirms that there is a way to save Loki, since she's still conscious. But he'll only do it on one condition. Uhlus stands, his gaze locked on Sisti. He demands that she promise to take everything she is about to witness to her grave. He waits for her answer, the fate of the girl in his arms hanging in the balance. Loki's consciousness drifts. Her head throbs. Her body feels impossibly heavy, and through the haze of pain, she hears the faint, distorted sound of the chairman's voice asking for her answer. Her surroundings begin to bleed into a memory. A dark, rainy place. The smell is nostalgic, bringing her back to a graveyard she knows all too well. The scene solidifies. She is a child again, kneeling silently before a grave as the cold rain soaks through her clothes. A man's voice cuts through the sound of the rain. The Governor General stands over her, holding an umbrella, and speaks of her parents, acknowledging that they were both excellent magicians. He apologizes, explaining that he couldn't even bring their bodies back. He knows the words are cruel to say to an 8-year-old, but it's the grim reality of their fate. But then, he makes her an offer, a chance to follow in their footsteps. He invites her to join the army and train as a magician, surrounded by others who share her hatred for the demons that took her family. Tears stream down Loki's face as she looks up from the grave. In that moment, she makes a vow, not just to her parents, but to herself. She would become strong enough to find them again, no matter what. And just like that, her childhood was over. The memory shifts to the relentless, stomping rhythm of military life, where every joy she once knew had been stripped away. The training was brutal. Day after day, she was pushed to her absolute limit, forced to dodge deadly obstacles with lightning-fast reflexes. The instructor's voice echoed through the training hall, screaming that they could rest when they were dead. Loki pushed through the exhaustion, but as she threw a kick, her body finally gave out and she began to lose her balance. She hit the hard floor with a sickening thud, the breath knocked out of her. Pain shot through her body. All she could do was lie there, panting and sobbing quietly in exhaustion. But there was no mercy here. The instructor towered over her, his shadow casting a dark pall as he screamed at her to stand up, calling this year's trainees useless. Later, back in her cold, barren room, Loki collapsed onto the bed. Her head ached, and her body was a mass of bruises and pain. This was her life now. The next morning came too soon with the harsh beep of an alarm. A voice from the doorway urged her to hurry, or she'd be late for attendance, as other trainees rushed past down the hall. There was no time to recover. Loki staggered out of her room, every muscle protesting. As another trainee looked on with concern, a single thought consumed her mind. I hate this. The other girls whispered in the hallways, their conversations filled with fear. They talked about the 10 dropouts this year alone, and the one trainee who got hurt so badly they lost their legs. Hearing their words, a cold dread washed over Loki. She couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow she might be the next one they were whispering about. But that fear was a fire. She threw herself back into the training, pushing harder than ever. Mom and Dad were gone. No one would protect her. No one would save her. She had to survive on her own. The feeling of being utterly alone fueled her, but in a moment of exhaustion, she froze. In the distance, high above the training floor, she saw something that stopped her dead in her tracks. Her mind broke. In a terrifying vision, she saw herself falling from a high beam. For the first time, she truly questioned everything. Why am I trying so hard? What am I even living for? As if the vision were real, her body gave out. She slipped and fell from the platform, but a voice screamed her name. Another trainee leaped from a nearby post, rushing to catch her. The instructor, Tori, caught her just in time. As Loki hung there, safe for a moment, she had a revelation. Trying to survive on hatred alone, it was suffocating. She missed her mom and dad so much. And in that moment of despair, a warm memory surfaced, taking her back to a peaceful day when her parents were still with her, sitting together under a tree. She remembered their kindness and the feeling of a gentle hand on her head. It was then she realized her true wish wasn't for revenge, but to one day repay the love they had given her. That was her reason to keep going. Loki's eyes flutter open. A drop of water from the grimy ceiling hits her face, and she slowly realizes she's back in her own room. A friendly voice cuts through her groggy state. The girl who saved her is there with a tray of food, relieved to see her awake after a full day of sleep. The girl explains that during practice, Loki had passed out and fallen from a high platform. Luckily, she landed in the safety net, getting away with only a light concussion and some scratches. Wiping the sleep from her eyes, Loki confirms that she remembers. With a bright smile, her friend encourages her to eat and rest up. But Loki just turns away, her spirit clearly broken as she mutters that she doesn't want it. But the girl doesn't give up. Kneeling beside the bed, she pulls out a necklace, a keepsake from her mother. She explains that this was the only thing they could bring back of her, and without it, she probably would have crumbled long ago. She holds it up, reassuring Loki that one day, she'll find her own precious keepsake too. Her simple, kind words seem to get through, and Loki quietly listens. Suddenly, the training alarm blares. Startled, the girl jumps to her feet, realizing she needs to get going. She tells Loki to rest up and rushes out the door. Left alone, Loki contemplates the girl's words about a keepsake, her thoughts drifting to her parents, whose bodies were still lost to the outside world. A new fire ignited within her. Back in the training hall, the instructor is shocked to see her. He asks if she shouldn't be resting, but Loki stands firm, her answer a clear no, sir. Her friend watches, worried, as Loki declares she's all right. In her mind, a new goal has formed. She would give her parents a proper burial. It was the only thing she could do for them now. And with that, the rigorous training continued. Fueled by this new purpose, Loki trained harder than ever. As the days turned into weeks, more and more trainees dropped out, but she never faltered. She became a machine, responding instantly to every command, her focus absolute. 2 years passed. The instructor pulled her aside, acknowledging her outstanding progress. The other trainees were no longer a challenge for her. It was time, he decided, for a real test. Her new opponent was a boy she'd never seen before. He had dark, messy hair and an unreadable expression that made him stand out from everyone else. Loki found herself momentarily captivated. She had never seen hair so black. The other trainees cleared out, leaving the two of them alone in the vast training hall. Uhalus Regan faced her, his voice calm as he simply said, "Let's have a good match." The fight started in an instant. Loki unleashed a powerful slash of energy, but Uhalus deflected it with a casual wave of his hand, as if swatting a fly. She was stunned. He dodged it. Without missing a beat, she abandoned her ranged attacks and lunged forward to close the distance. But his movements were on another level entirely. With a simple, fluid kick, he swept her legs out from under her, sending her crashing to the floor. Looking up in shock, Loki realized she couldn't even follow his movements. It had been so long since she'd lost. For the first time, fighting felt like a real challenge, almost like she was facing a seasoned adult. And despite the defeat, she found herself enjoying it. This boy became her new goal. Every day, she fought him, and every day, she pushed herself a little further. Lying in bed at night, she'd wonder if she could ever become as strong as him. Knowing that with each loss, she was improving. She decided that the next time they met, she would finally ask for his name. But that day never came. He stopped showing up for their mock battles. 2.5 years passed, and eventually, she got her first real mission, to exterminate a demon in the outside world. The instructor gathered the recent graduates. He delivered the grim news. Demon encroachment had breached the country's first defensive line, and the damage was severe. Their mission was to hunt down and eliminate any demons that had escaped. He knew many of them were fresh recruits, but with a severe lack of personnel, there was no other choice. The instructor gave them one final, stark warning. Be aware of your surroundings out there. Amidst the tension, her friend appeared at her side, smiling brightly that they'd been assigned to the same squad. Loki simply nodded, her expression unreadable as they stood in formation, preparing to face the horrors of the real world together. As they head out, the other new recruits are buzzing with excitement, bragging about how they'll finally get to show off their skills. But Loki is silent, her mind grimly focused on a single thought. Whatever they are, I'll kill them all. She glances at the mission map. Their objective is near the 4th outpost base, the place where her parents died. After all this time, she was finally going to the outside world. This was her chance. But the mission was a lie. The moment they arrived, they were ambushed. These weren't low-grade survivors. They were high-grade monsters, and the entire squad was being slaughtered. They were never told about this. A fallen comrade reaches out, desperately begging for someone to save him before he's dragged away into the darkness. Loki can only watch, frozen in terror. Her friend collapses beside her, consumed by panic and apologizing over and over. She knows that if she doesn't save them, everyone is going to die. Summoning every last bit of her courage, she steels herself, remembering all the years of practice, all the hard work she put in for this very day. She prepares to make her stand. But it's useless. In a flash of movement too fast to see, the demon's claw slices through the air. Loki watches in pure horror as her friend's head tumbles to the ground with a sickening thud. A small, choked scream escapes her lips. The monstrous demon turns its attention to her, its cold, reptilian eye glaring down with pure malice. It opens its massive jaws, ready to devour her. Loki closes her eyes, defeated. She thinks of her parents, apologizing for failing them, for dying having accomplished nothing. Suddenly, a massive explosion rips through the air. A voice cuts through the chaos, muttering with annoyance, "TCH, so I didn't make it in time." Loki's eyes fly open in shock. Before she can even process what's happening, the demon that had seemed invincible is instantly obliterated, its body torn apart by an unseen force. And there, standing calmly amidst the carnage, is a figure cloaked in black. It's the boy from the training institute, Uhulus Regan, now taller and surrounded by an aura of overwhelming power. He lands softly beside the trembling Loki, his voice calm as he asks if she's okay and tells her not to push herself. She can only stare, completely stunned. He gently pats her on the head, a gesture of unexpected comfort. "It's my fault for getting here late," he says, taking the blame for the massacre. Seeing that she's injured and in shock, he tells her to hop on his back, saying he'll take her to HQ. All Loki can do is weakly agree. As he carries her away from the battlefield, the fog in her mind begins to clear. His voice is deeper, he's taller, but there's no mistaking it. It's him, the boy from all those years ago. So he didn't drop out after all. As this realization hits her, a sudden urgency takes over. She grabs onto his cloak, shouting for him to wait. She pleads with him to let her down. Confused but complying, he gently sets her on her feet among some ancient-looking ruins. Uhulus asks if there's something important here. Loki looks around, her heart pounding as she recognizes the crumbling walls. There's no mistaking it. This is the 4th outpost base. With a heavy heart, she turns to him and explains the significance of this desolate place. This is where her parents died. She finds a large, smooth stone among the rubble and clears it off. Kneeling before it, she whispers to her parents. She had been ready to die, but now, standing here, she feels the long years that have passed, with no remains and no keepsakes to remember them by. With Uhulus standing silently behind her, she finally gets to pay her respects, her hands clasped in prayer as she apologizes for taking so long to visit. As if nature itself were paying tribute, leaves gently fall around them. To her surprise, Uhulus steps forward and joins her, bowing his head in a quiet moment of shared respect. Tears well up in her eyes, but for the first time in a long time, it's not from sadness. She looks back at him with a genuine smile and offers a heartfelt thank you. The goal that had driven her for years was finally complete, leaving her with a question. What would she do with her life now? With her old purpose fulfilled, she finds a new one. It's thanks to him that she was able to mourn. And so, she decides she will give what remains of her life to him. Gathering her courage, she asks him for his name. He answers her directly. Alus Regen. The name echoes in her mind, the name of the boy who had become her goal, and now, her savior. Back in the present, Loki's eyes blink open. The long, painful dream is over, but the promise she made is one she'll never forget. She's in the academy infirmary, and sitting in a chair beside her bed is Uhulus, who calmly states, "You're finally up, huh?" He explains that she was knocked out during the mock battle, so he carried her here. Loki looks down, ashamed. She remembers breaking a taboo during the fight, and now, she's too scared to even face him. But Uhulus just looks at her with his usual stoic expression and says, "I'm sorry I didn't get there to rescue you sooner." His words hit her like a lightning bolt. He remembers their first mission together. Overcome with emotion, she blurts out that it's not his fault, her voice filled with a desperate loyalty. Her mind flashes back through all the times he'd appeared before her. Just like when he was at the Institute, and when she was on her first mission, he continues to save her time and time again. Loki's mind drifts back to a specific day, a day that would change her life forever. It was the day she decided to dedicate her entire life to serving Uhulus, the one who had saved her. Meanwhile, the Academy's chairman, Sisti, sits in her office, deep in thought. She's running out of time and needs to finalize a plan for the upcoming combat training. A flicker of guilt crosses her face. She knows her plan will put a heavy burden on Uhulus. But watching from afar, she steels her resolve, convinced that this is the only path forward. Back in the room, Loki looks down, her voice soft as she calls out Aluza's name. She confesses that she has committed a taboo, a line a magician should never cross, and is ready to accept her punishment. With her eyes closed, She quietly says she understands what must be done. But instead of a harsh reprimand, a gentle hand comes down on her head with a light chop, completely taking her by surprise. Uhulus tells her he can't just overlook the fact that she risked her life, but he'll let her off the hook this time. Loki is left dazed and confused by his response. Loki tries to argue, insisting that her sin was unforgivable, but Uhulus suddenly leans in close, silencing her before she can finish. He pulls her into an embrace, leaving her completely speechless and flustered. Just then, the door bursts open, and two other girls, Tesphia and Alice, come stumbling in, their eyes wide with shock at what they're seeing. They trip over their own feet and fall flat on the floor, their dramatic entrance turning into a clumsy mess. Uhulus looks over at the two girls on the floor, a smirk playing on his lips as he calls them out for eavesdropping. Alice immediately starts to panic. The girls quickly change the subject, asking who Loki is. Seeing no other choice, Uhulus decides it's time to introduce them. He casually announces that Loki is his new partner, an introduction that leaves Tesphia completely stunned. Both Tesphia and Alice stare in disbelief, unable to process the word partner. Uhulus recalls their previous battle, reminding Loki that she won their bet since her attack managed to land. He then leans in and whispers, telling her not to worry about the taboo. Since only he and the chairman were there, it would be easy to keep it a secret. Loki is still hesitant, overwhelmed by his kindness and the gravity of the situation. Uhulus then presents her with a choice: accept his help, or he could bring her before the army. Terrified by the thought, Loki shakes her head frantically and quickly agrees to his terms. With the matter settled, Uhulus tells Loki to wait for him in his room. Tesphia and Alice then properly introduce themselves to their new acquaintance. Alice, ever curious, immediately starts questioning Loki about what kind of partner she is to Uhulus. A bit lost, Loki admits she doesn't know where his room is and asks for directions. In response to their question, Loki explains the official role of a partner, someone who aids a high-ranking magician in hunting demons in the outside world. Her serious answer doesn't seem to register, as the girls immediately start gossiping amongst themselves, questioning why someone as strong as Uhulus, who is still active in the army, even needs to be at school. Loki twitches in annoyance as she overhears them. Their casual gossip about Uhulus, who she reveres, strikes her as incredibly disrespectful. Finally, she can't take it anymore and interrupts them. With a cold tone, she tells them they clearly have no idea what the current rank number 1 has truly done for humanity. Tesphia and Alice are taken aback by her sudden seriousness. Loki explains that the very peace they take for granted at the academy is a direct result of Aluza's sacrifices. She tells them that if they knew the truth, they would never dare to call him by a simple nickname like Al. Tesphia concedes her point, admitting that they can't possibly imagine the hardships Uhulus must have endured to reach his position. While they agree that rank 1 deserves respect, Tesphia points out that Uhulus isn't perfect, and that in the few weeks they've known him, they've been trying to understand him as a person. She smiles warmly, declaring that before his title, before his rank, Uhulus is her precious friend. Alice chimes in, saying Uhulus seems to be the type who makes enemies without even realizing it. The comment makes Tesphia blush, remembering how she rashly challenged him to a duel when they first met. Tesphia's expression softens as she continues, admitting that she's curious about Uhulus, because even though he seems unapproachable, he also carries an aura of sadness and loneliness. The word lonely catches Loki's attention. Tesphia finishes by saying that as long as Uhulus is at the academy, she thinks it's right for them to act as his friends. Tesphia then turns to Loki, pointing out that since she's new, she doesn't know what Uhulus is like in this school environment. Loki quietly acknowledges that what she said is true, her resolve beginning to waver. She thinks to herself that these girls are immature, inexperienced magicians who can't possibly grasp Aluza's true greatness. And yet, he has taken them under his wing. Even so, a strange feeling begins to stir within her as she watches them. Loki admits to herself that she's a little envious of them. They've seen sides of Uhulus that she has never witnessed. She then pulls out a pair of scissors, preparing to snip the tag off her new uniform. The scene shifts to Uhulus, who is now meeting with the chairman, Sisti. He asks her to keep everything that happened with Loki a secret. Sisti agrees with a sly grin, adding that in exchange, she won't say anything about the device at the training area. It's clear a deal has been struck. She then asks how Uhulus managed to deceive Loki. He replies that he didn't have to do anything, revealing that even the chairman, who was standing right there, only saw the end result and not the full extent of his actions. He begins to explain the truth. The emergency measure he used to save Loki's life was a forbidden taboo. He extracted all of her mana and replaced it with his own. Uhulus reveals his deepest secret. He possesses two distinct types of mana. One is the normal energy body that all magicians use. The other is a pure, thirsting desire. This dark power is called variant mana. It's a predatory energy, the same insatiable hunger for mana that all demons possess. He explains that a normal mana transfer is impossible due to the body's rejection response. However, his variant mana first consumed all of Loki's mana, which then cleared the way for his normal mana to replenish her without being rejected. It was an incredibly dangerous gamble, but it paid off. Sisti smiles, saying she's glad he felt compelled to protect Loki. She assures him his remaining mana in Loki's body will fade over time, then spreads a set of documents on the table. Uhulus looks at the papers, confused. Sisti informs him it's Loki's transfer application to the Academy, which has already been approved. She muses aloud, wondering how someone as capable as Loki could only be a 4-digit magician. Uhulus agrees that Loki's combat skills are easily on par with a 2-digit. But Sisti reveals a surprising fact. Loki's highest rank was 157. However, despite her talent and affinity for being a searcher, she was never once paired up during her time in the army. Sisti explains that as a result, Loki's rank plummeted to 4 digits. She tells Uhulus he can ask Loki for the rest of the story, but he dismisses the idea, saying there's no reason to at this point. Uhulus gets up to leave, stating that he only came to make sure the chairman wouldn't reveal Loki's secret. Now that they have an understanding, he's ready to go. But just as he turns to walk away, Sisti stops him. With a playful tone, she asks if he forgot about her hush money. A chill runs down Uhulu's spine. He scoffs, asking if she's joking. Sisti calmly explains that covering up a taboo like his puts her own position at risk, so she expects something in return for her silence. Uhulus offers to pay her, but he knows she's not interested in money. Instead, she leans back with a sly smile, proposing a different kind of payment. She asks him to give her his all in the upcoming combat training. It's not a request. It's the price of her silence. A shadow falls over Uhulu's face. He's been completely outplayed. He grabs the back of the sofa, understanding her true intention. She wants him to act as a secret guardian, saving students who get into danger. Sisti's thoughts confirm it. This is her plan to minimize casualties during the month-long training exercise. Uhulus tries to refuse, claiming he's not suited for the job. But Sisti insists, promising to give him detailed directions. She knows that gaining experience is the whole point of the training. She leans forward, practically begging him. After a moment of silence, Uhulus gently rustles her hair, causing her to look up in surprise. He sighs, finally giving in. Understood, he says, admitting that while it's a huge pain, it's the only real option they have. He can't help but think how sly she is. With their deal sealed, Sisti waves a cheerful goodbye, telling him she'll see him in the evening to finalize the details. Walking down the hall, Uhulus reflects on the conversation. He realizes worrying about her silence was pointless. She was always going to use her leverage. He feels frustrated, realizing how much the Academy has forced him out of his comfort zone. His thoughts drift to the 3 girls. All he ever wanted was to take it easy, but strangely, he doesn't hate his current situation. He wonders if they're training hard right now. He finds them in a lounge, but they're not training at all. Instead, Tesfia and Alice are doting on Loki, petting her and chattering away. Uhulus calls out, his voice laced with annoyance. Loki immediately springs to attention, flustered. Uhulus tells her they need to talk about her overly formal way of addressing him, but Tesphia just brushes it off, saying they're simply deepening their relationship. Alice continues to hug Loki, gushing about how cute she is, while Uhulus looks on, completely unimpressed with their slacking. To shock them into action, Uhulus casually mentions that Loki has a lot of battle experience, and her highest rank was 157, a level that rivals two-digit magicians. The reveal leaves Tesphia and Alice speechless. Loki blushes at the praise, but humbly says she's still no match for him, which only makes the other two feel worse about their own skills. Uhulus twists the knife, pointing out that Loki is now the most exceptional student in their grade. He muses aloud that perhaps he should just focus on training her and forget about them. His threat hits its mark. The two girls start trembling, scrambling to make excuses. They insist they were just on a break and were about to discuss mana theory. Uhulus smirks, seeing that they're finally motivated. He then changes the subject, casually asking about the results of their recent mock battle tests. Their faces immediately go blank. Seeing their horrified reaction, Uhulus just waves his hand dismissively, saying he can guess how badly they lost. He tells them it's good they didn't get hurt, which only makes Tesphia glare at him. With his job done, Uhulus declares it's time for them to get to training. He walks off, but not before glancing back to see the three of them finally practicing their mana manipulation with serious expressions. Later, he finds a quiet spot in the library to do some reading, but his thoughts drift back to the students. He realizes his very presence, his overwhelming power, has created a false sense of security, making them all complacent with peace. Loki approaches him from behind the bookshelf. She remarks that it can't be helped. The girls don't understand the extent of his accomplishments, or that the current peace is a direct result of his work. She correctly deduces that the higher-ups only proposed the combat training because they grew uneasy after he left the front lines. She wonders if this is why he truly left the army to pursue research. Uhulus brushes off the army's motives, claiming they have nothing to do with him. He clarifies his own goal. In order for him to live a peaceful life, the world needs more high-quality magicians with real combat experience. Loki asks if he thinks Tesphia and Alice have that potential, and he admits that for Academy students, they're exceptional. Loki then asks why he's teaching them if that's the case. Uhulus reveals that the chairman forced him to, but adds that it's also part of another one of his own little plots. With a sly smile, he admits his selfish motivation. If they become two-digit magicians, it would make his own life a lot easier. Loki presses him, asking if he truly believes they have the potential. Uhulus, studying a map, says he doesn't know. He explains that there will always be walls that no amount of hard work can overcome. Whether they can break through depends entirely on their will to live. He taps a location on the map, his expression unreadable. He states that in the end, it's those who survive that go on to greater heights. With his eyes fixed on the documents before him, Uhulus gives his final answer. We'll find out soon.